Hello and welcome to This Day in Esoteric Political History from Radiotopia. My name is Jody Avirgan. It is January 19th, and today we're going to do something a little different on the show. Tomorrow, of course, is Donald Trump's inauguration for his second term. We will keep our eye on that. And then on Tuesday, the day after inauguration, we're going to have an episode that sort of ties a little bit into that. But today, on this Sunday, I wanted to talk about something that perhaps flew under the radar a bit as everyone is thinking about what's coming with the next administration. And that is the goodbye to the Biden administration, and specifically the farewell address that Joe Biden gave earlier this week on Wednesday night. I'll talk a little bit more about it in a second and share my thoughts, but I got to say I was very struck by the speech. I happened to catch it on the actual radio and listen to it. But it was very historically minded, which I think makes it sort of appropriate for this show and a lot of things I think about on this show. And I don't know how many people stopped and kind of spent time with it in a way that maybe they should have. So we're going to talk about it and other notable farewell addresses, and then we're going to try something out. But first, here, as always, Nicole Hemmer of Vanderbilt and Kelly Carter-Jackson of Wellesley. Hello there.
Hello, Jody.
Hey there.
So, as I said, I want to talk a little bit about farewell speeches, but then I don't know, I had this instinct as soon as I finished hearing it that I wanted to play it in full on the show. So after we talk a little bit, we're going to just play Joe Biden's farewell address. It's 18 minutes, not that long, and I think it's worth listening to in full, no matter how it makes you feel. And we'll talk about how complicated it can make us feel. But it is very historically minded. I thought it was pretty striking. But for a few minutes at least, let's widen the lens, talk about farewell addresses in general. And I guess maybe sort of by definition, they fly under the radar, right? Like they're tucked in at the very end where everyone's already kind of moving on to the next thing. But
yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of this moment where a president stands up and says, hey, the new guy hasn't been sworn in yet. I still have a few things to say, which it definitely has that feel, right? Like I have one more shot at trying to shape my legacy. And this farewell address is going to be my time to just like put a button on this whole thing. And we'll talk about why they often include warnings and things like that. But at least this goes back, obviously, to George Washington, but at least since Truman, this has been a regular feature of presidencies as presidents have tried to secure their legacies.
I mean, it's what I do every semester in the last day class. And I'm like, let's review the themes. Let's review the goals of this course. Like, just in case you didn't know what the purpose of this class was.
And then offer a warning that you may fail the test.
I think there is something about, I don't know if you can call it closure, but I'll use closure. There's something about being able to sort of have a farewell, say a goodbye, remind people of what you accomplished, sort of warn them or encourage them about what might come next. And I think it's just a way for people to have a transition of power in some ways that shows that, I don't know, not just that you're a good sport, but that you still have faith in this country and that the country will go on. You know, like there's something about it that I think people need to see, like the handshake at the end of a sporting event. I mean, there's some ways in which people, need that.
But it's not the concession speech, right?
Yeah.
Right.
It's a little different, right? And so it's not just, I wish the next person luck. It is, obviously often and I think the vast majority of them, it's mostly like a defense of what I did and a trying to summation of what I did. But I want to talk about a couple specific examples, and then Biden's speech, I think, fits into this category. But I think what you sometimes see in a farewell address is a president who is unencumbered. They're not running again. They're being reflective, are often handing things off to the opposite party. And I just am struck by, at least in a number of cases, presidents who kind of say a thing that they probably wouldn't have said up until that moment. And so the one that really jumps out to me, and I will say, as I was listening to Biden's speech, I thought of Eisenhower's speech. And then Biden himself name-checked Eisenhower like 30 seconds after. I was like, wow, man, he's really going there. It sounds like Eisenhower's speech. But, the speech in which Eisenhower talks about the emerging military-industrial complex, it has always struck me as really kind of, I don't know, poignant or whatever, but that was in his farewell address, And Eisenhower oversaw wars. He was a military guy. And for him in that final speech to sort of sound the clarion call about the military industrial complex, I think is really remarkable, and shows that kind of what these speeches can do, because I think he injected that idea into like the discourse.
Yeah.
Like, he planted a really big flag with that, even though it was in his final speech, and you can do the kind of like, well, it's a little too late, too little too late kind of thing with it.
But the idea of oligarchy, I mean, that's what Biden is talking about. He's talking about these uber wealthy people that have way too much control and influence over the country, and not just their power, but I think how that's often tethered to tech and AI and how we perceive the world. I mean, it's a tremendous cautionary tale when you think about it like that.
Yeah, and that's the callback to Eisenhower, right? Is that Eisenhower sat in the middle of this system, and as a general was sort of a representative of this system of the military-industrial complex that had developed in many ways, or really gelled in many ways under his administration in those early years of the Cold War. And he sees this come into being and helps it come into being, and then is looking at it and is like, let's keep our eye on that. Like, I think that we needed that in order to respond to the Soviets in the Cold War. But this could turn out to be a problem. And that actually, I think, is slightly different from how Biden talked about oligarchy. I didn't really think that Biden...
So people will listen to it, but can I just read the quote?
Yeah.
People will hear this. But he says, today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America. And then this is the part that really struck me, but he brings history into it. He says, we've seen it before more than a century ago, but the American people stood up to robber barons back then and busted the trusts. So, that was the line that made me perk up. Yeah,
and I actually think the tech industrial complex thing is kind of a red herring, because it's that first part. It's the oligarchy. It's the way in which billionaires have been running the government, and maybe Biden could have taken a little more ownership before his alliances with very wealthy people. But in particular, that we are entering a period that we've been entering for a long time, thanks to things like Citizens United, but that has particularly ramped up in the last few weeks, where it's literal billionaires at all of these sort of pivot points of the U.S. government. And it has made oligarchy go from, which in some ways was kind of metaphorical, like it was like, well, there's very wealthy people who are giving money to government, and now it's like, no, it is the billionaires in the seat.
The guy who's standing next
that
to the
are
president.
running the government.
And the president himself.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever had the urge to sneak behind the cordoned off areas of a museum? Or roam the halls after closing time? The Smithsonian's flagship podcast, Side Door, will sneak you behind the scenes of the world's largest museum and research complex. Come learn about the ghosts that supposedly walk the museum halls after dark, how a train robbery gave rise to criminal forensics, why leeches are actually the coolest thing ever, and how to get away with murder in the Arctic. Maybe. You'll discover stories of history, science, art, and culture you won't find in a display case. You can listen to Side Door wherever you get your podcasts, or find us online at si.edu/sidedoor.
So, Kelly, I mean, obviously a lot of reaction to this speech. I mean, there wasn't probably that much reaction to the speech. I think it largely flew under the radar. But I think I did see a lot of reaction to this speech. It was like, oh, Biden calls out the oligarchs. Well, like, who was president the last 4 years? Or Biden, he does go on to say, well, people will listen. But, he talks about Supreme Court reform, about a bunch of like concrete reforms that need to happen, very similar to a lot of the reforms that took place in this country a century ago. And there's like this meme of like, we're all trying to find the guy who did this, right? From this Tim Robinson show. And it's like, well, you were president. Where was this all along? So I don't know what you make of that.
Yeah, I mean, hindsight is always 20/20. I mean, you're always going to be able to look back on something and say what should have been or what we could have worked for. But that was not the case, And I mean, that's why these speeches are a little tricky, right? Because you can sort of say what to watch out for, but if it was on your watch when a lot of these things took place, then how are people supposed to make sense of that? So I don't know. I look at this speech too, and I also think that, like, if there's anything that kind of makes me sad, I don't know if sad is the right word, but this is the end for Biden. You know, like, he's been in political service for 50, 60 years, for a really long time, his entire life. And the legacy that he leaves is a little mixed. And there's no way to get around that. There's just no way to get around that.
But I guess that's what strikes me a little bit about the speech, too. He could have given a, like, I've devoted myself to this country.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me serve this country speech. And instead he says, you know, here are the huge problems in this country and the huge challenges.
And I think
starker terms than I've ever heard him say.
Yeah.
Which I think is important. I mean, if you think about the bounds of the Biden presidency, he comes into office saying, like, democracy's in danger and we need to secure it. And with the re-election of Donald Trump, it's a demonstration that that didn't work. I think any warning in a farewell address is a sign that something failed, right? You didn't quite get everything done that you meant to get done, but you see the writing on the wall. And in the case of tech, I kind of wonder if Biden didn't replicate something that happened in the Obama administration, which a real embrace of the tech industry at the beginning of these administrations. Because remember, it was Facebook and Twitter who were kicking Donald Trump off.
Yeah.
And who were part of these efforts to stem misinformation and disinformation. And then in the last few years, they were like, maybe not, and have gone sort of like, full speed ahead. And Biden is like, oh, we didn't frankly do anything to counter that. And now it's clear, now that they've realigned with the Trump administration, that that's going to have some profound consequences that the Biden administration didn't even get its arms around.
No.
And now that's what we're facing.
Yeah.
So look, it's only been a month and a bit since the election, but I do think in those weeks we have kind of seen, like, oh wow, like, I see the score here a little bit about the sort of alignment between tech and oligarchy and the incoming Trump administration. So, you know, maybe there's, like, Biden sees it and this speech is different than something he would have been than he saw even a few months ago. But to your point, Nikki, about the warning about democracy being in danger and how that didn't really land with people and wasn't mobilizing in the way that maybe it had been a few years earlier, to me, this speech serves as evidence to me that, like, a message of not democracy's in danger, but rich people are screwing you over.
Yes.
And look at all these people, these crony capitalists. You know, that message is powerful, as we're about to hear. And I think it could have worked. And I think, you know, it's evidence that, like, we had this conversation ad nauseum, but at some basic level, the Harris campaign was sort of in a lane of defending the status quo when, in fact, they could have made an argument that, like, we agree everything is broken, but we think it's broken in a different way, and we have a different idea about how to fix it. And this is Biden very forcefully saying things are deeply broken.
Yeah.
And I think that
when the president has
run
complete immunity, when, you know.
Right. But I think they could have run that campaign, and that was another thought I had coming out of this. Didn't make me feel good. But, you know, as much as I sort of admire this speech, I was like, oh gosh, where was this language? You know, this language could have, I think, done something in the election.
But I don't know. Also, according to Biden, I mean, had he run, he might have won.
Well,
like that. Like, I was like, really, dude?
No, not Biden. Not Biden.
Well, let's not check let's not fact check all the instincts here.
I know. I was like, oh man, like, but there's, I don't know.
Okay, we're gonna play this address. I want people to listen to it, but we should, just as we're doing a review of other farewell speeches. I mean, we went back and looked at Trump's farewell speech in 2021. It's pretty remarkable. But Nikki, you referred to it as a hostage video.
It was absolutely a hostage video of his speech. Look, his impeachment was pending. He was skulking his way out of Washington, D.C., and he's like, okay, it was bad. Sorry, guys.
He says all Americans were horrified by the assault on our capital. Political violence is an attack on everything we cherish as Americans. It can never be tolerated. So
how'd that hold up?
That was a hostage video. Just remember that line and compare it to what we're going to hear tomorrow. from Donald Trump in his inauguration. So, but yeah, I mean, he said those words.
They came out of his mouth.
Somebody wrote him.
Somebody wrote it. Yeah. All right. Okay. So, listeners, I hope you will abide here and actually listen and just sort of spend some time with this. God, how do I put this? I got to say, look, listening to Biden can be tough. I get a little of my shoulders go up a little bit. The guy is, he's very old. He's halting in all the ways that Biden is. We got to try and not just see the snippets that fly around or the takes or whatever, and actually spend time with the stuff people say. And so I urge people to kind of stick around and try and listen to the full 18 minutes and feel all the feelings. But Nicole Hammer, thanks to you as always.
Thank you, Jody.
And Kelly Carter Jackson, thanks to you.
My pleasure.
My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you tonight from the Oval Office. This will be my final address to you from the American people from the Oval Office, from this desk as president. And I've been thinking a lot about who we are and maybe more importantly, who we should be. Long ago in New York Harbor, an iron worker installed beam after beam, day after day. He was joined by steel workers, stonemasons, engineers. They built not just a single structure, but a beacon of freedom. The very idea of America was so big, we felt the entire world needed to see. The Statue of Liberty, a gift from France after our Civil War. Like the very idea of America, it was built not by one person, but by many people, from every background and from around the world. Like America, the Statue of Liberty is not standing still. Her foot literally steps forward atop a broken chain of human bondage. She's on the march, and she literally moves. She was built to sway back and forth to withstand the fury of stormy weather, to stand the test of time because storms are always coming. She sways a few inches, but she never falls into the current below. An engineering marvel. The Statue of Liberty is also an enduring symbol of the soul of our nation. A soul shaped by forces that bring us together and by forces that pull us apart. And yet, through good times and tough times, we've withstood it all. A nation of pioneers and explorers, of dreamers and doers, of ancestors native to this land, of ancestors who came by force, a nation of immigrants who came to build a better life, a nation holding the torch of the most powerful idea ever in the history of the world, that all of us are created equal, that all of us deserve to be treated with dignity, justice, and fairness, that democracy must defend and be defined and be imposed, moved in every way possible. Our rights, our freedoms, our dreams. But we know the idea of America, our institution, our people, our values that uphold it are constantly being tested. Ongoing debates about power and the exercise of power. But whether we lead by the example of our power or the power of our example. Whether we show the courage to stand up to the abuse of power or we yield to it. After 50 years at the center of all of this, I know that believing in the idea of America means respecting the institutions that govern a free society. The presidency, the Congress, the courts, a free and independent press. Institutions that are rooted, they just might not reflect the timeless words, but they echo the words of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident. Rooted in the timeless words of the Constitution, we the people. Our system of separation of powers, checks and balances. It may not be perfect, but it's maintained our democracy for nearly 250 years, longer than any other nation in history that's ever tried such a bold experiment. In the past 4 years, our democracy has held strong. And every day I've kept my commitment to be president for all Americans through one of the toughest periods in our nation's history. I've had a great partner in Vice President Kamala Harris. It's been the honor of my life to see the resilience of essential workers getting us through a once-in-a-century pandemic. The heroism of service members and first responders keeping us safe. The determination of advocates standing up for our rights and our freedoms instead of losing their jobs to an economic crisis that we inherited. Millions of Americans now have the dignity of work. Millions of entrepreneurs and companies creating new businesses and industries, hiring American workers, using American products. And together, we've launched a new era of American possibilities. One of the greatest modernizations of infrastructure in our entire history, from new roads, bridges, clean water, affordable high-speed internet for every American. We invented the semiconductor, smaller than the tip of my little finger, and now is bringing those chip factories and those jobs back to America where they belong, creating thousands of jobs. Finally, giving Medicare the power to negotiate lower prescription drug prices for millions of seniors. And finally, doing something to protect our children and our families by passing the most significant gun safety law in 30 years and bringing violent crime to a 50-year low. Meeting our sacred obligation to over 1 million veterans so far who are exposed to toxic materials, and to their families, providing medical care and education benefits and more for their families. You know, it will take time to feel the full impact of all we've done together. But the seeds are planted, and they'll grow and they'll bloom for decades to come. At home, we've created nearly 17 million new jobs, more than any other single administration, single term. More people have health care than ever before. And overseas, we've strengthened NATO. Ukraine is still free. And we pulled ahead of our competition with China. And so much more. I'm so proud of how much we've accomplished together for the American people. And I wish the incoming administration success, because I want America to succeed. That's why I've held my duty to ensure a peaceful and orderly transition of power, to ensure we lead by the power of our example. I have no doubt that America is in a position to continue to succeed. That's why my farewell address tonight, I want to warn the country of some things that give me great concern. This is a dangerous and that's a dangerous concentration of power in the hands of a very few ultra-wealthy people. The dangerous consequences if their abuse of power is left unchecked. Today, an oligarchy is taking shape in America of extreme wealth, power, and influence that literally threatens our entire democracy, our basic rights and freedoms, and a fair shot for everyone to get ahead. We see the consequences all across America, and we've seen it before. More than a century ago, but the American people stood up to the robber barons back then and busted the trusts. They didn't punish the wealthy, just made the wealthy play by the rules everybody else had to. Workers want rights to earn their fair share. You know, they were dealt into the deal, and it helped put us on a path to building the largest middle class, the most prosperous century any nation in the world has ever seen. We've got to do that again. In the last 4 years, that is exactly what we've done. People should be able to make as much as they can, but play by the same rules. Pay their fair share of taxes. So much is at stake. Right now, the existential threat of climate change has never been clearer. Just look across the country, from California to North Carolina. That's why I signed the most significant climate and clean energy law ever in the history of the world, and the rest of the world is trying to model it now. It's working, creating jobs and industries of the future. Now, we've proven we don't have to choose between protecting the environment and growing the economy. We're doing both. The powerful forces want to wield their unchecked influence to eliminate the steps we've taken to tackle the climate crisis, to serve their own interest for power and profit. We must not be bullied into sacrificing the future of our children and our grandchildren. We must keep pushing forward and push faster. There's no time to waste. It's also clear that American leadership in technology is an unparalleled source of innovation that can transform lives. We see the same dangers of the concentration of technology, power, and wealth. You know, his farewell address, President Eisenhower spoke of the dangers of the military-industrial complex. He warned us then about, and I quote, the potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power, end of quote. 6 decades later, I'm equally concerned about the potential rise of a tech-industrial complex that could pose real dangers for our country as well. Americans are being buried under an avalanche of misinformation and disinformation, enabling the abuse of power. The free press is crumbling. Editors are disappearing. Social media is giving up on fact-checking. The truth is smothered by lies told for power and for profit. We must hold the social platforms accountable to protect our children, our families, and our very democracy from the abuse of power. Meanwhile, artificial intelligence is the most consequential technology of our time, perhaps of all time. Nothing offers more profound possibilities and risks for our economy and our security, our society, for humanity. Artificial intelligence even has the potential to help us answer my call to end cancer as we know it. But unless safeguards are in place, AI could spawn new threats to our rights, our way of life, to our privacy, how we work, and how we protect our nation. We must make sure AI is safe and trustworthy and good for all humankind. In the age of AI, it's more important than ever that the people must govern. And as the land of liberty, America, not China, must lead the world in the development of AI. You know, in the years ahead, it's going to be up to the president, the presidency, the Congress, the courts, the free press, and the American people to confront these powerful forces. We must reform the tax code, not by giving the biggest tax cuts to billionaires, but by making them begin to pay their fair share. We need to get dark money. That's that hidden funding behind too many campaigns contributions. We need to get it out of our politics. We need to enact an 18-year time limit, time and term, for the strongest ethics reforms for our Supreme Court. We need to ban members of Congress from trading stock while they're in the Congress. We need to amend the Constitution to make clear that no president is immune from crimes that he or she commits while in office. The president's power is not limited. It's not absolute, and it shouldn't be. And in a democracy, there's another danger to the concentration of power and wealth. It erodes a sense of unity and common purpose. It causes distrust and division. Participating in our democracy becomes exhausting and even disillusioning. And people don't feel like they have a fair shot. We have to stay engaged in the process. I know it's frustrating. A fair shot is what makes America, America. Everyone's entitled to a fair shot, not a guarantee, but just a fair shot, an even playing field, going as far as your hard work and talent can take you. We can never lose that essential truth, remain who we are. I've always believed, and I've told other world leaders, America can be defined by one word: possibilities. Only in America do we believe anything is possible. Like a kid with a stutter from modest beginnings in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and Claremont, Delaware, sitting behind this desk in the Oval Office as President of the United States. That's the magic of America. It's all around us. Upstairs in the residence of the White House, I've walked by a painting of the Statue of Liberty I don't know how many times. In the painting, there's several workers climbing on the outstretched arm of the statue that holds the torch. It reminds me every day I pass it of the story and soul of our nation and the power of the American people. There's a story of a veteran. This is a veteran, the son of an immigrant, whose job was to climb that torch and polish the amber panes so rays of light could reach out as far as possible. He was known as the keeper of the flame. He once said of the Statue of Liberty, quote, speaks the silent universal language, one of hope that anyone who seeks and speaks freedom can understand. Yes, we sway back and forth to withstand the fury of the storm, to stand the test of time. A constant struggle, a short distance between peril and possibility. But what I believe is the America of our dreams is always closer than we think. It's up to us to make our dreams come true. Let me close by stating my gratitude to so many people, to the members of my administration, as well as public service and first responders across the country and around the world. Thank you for stepping up to serve. To our service members and your families, it's been the highest honor of my life to lead you as Commander-in-Chief. And of course to Kamala and our incredible partner, the historic Vice President. She and Doug have become like family. And to me, family's everything. My deepest appreciation to our amazing First Lady who's with me in the Oval today. For our entire family. You're the love of my life and the lives of my love. My eternal thanks to you, the American people. After 50 years of public service, I give you my word. I still believe in the idea for which this nation stands. A nation where the strength of our institutions and the character of our people matter and must endure. Now it's your turn to stand guard. May you all be the keeper of the flame. May you keep the faith. I love America. You love it too. God bless you all. And may God protect our troops. Thank you for this great honor.
Radiotopia.